This is a tribute to the Chassid, the Pinchus Korf, Harav Chassid, the Pinchus Korf, who was known as the Korf. The Pinchus ben Rabbi Yehoshua Korf, Rabbi Shia Korf was his father, a Tamim, and the Shama returned to HaKadosh Baruch Hu today, the 20th of Tammuz. I knew the Pinchus, and I'd like to share the Tevas Nishmasai, a few points. The Pinchus was what you would call an old-fashioned chassid. He was born in Kharkov, and happens to be that my father-in-law's family, the Serebranskis, were close to the Korfs from Kharkov. They also lived in Kharkov. And Rabbi later came with his family to France, and from there to America. He once told me that he was from the younger Talmidim students of Reb Nissen Nemenov. They were older. He said, my shver, Reb Chaim Serebransky, was from the older students, and he was from the younger ones. They were also in Samarkand, I believe, before France, and that's what he was referring to. He was from the younger students. But when he farbrengt, especially when he farbrengt here in Borough Park, there were opportunities that he shared some of the lessons, life lessons he took from his mashpia, Reb Nissen Nemenov. And you could say that he was like an embodiment of Reb Nissen. Reb Nissen's maila, Reb Nissen's virtue was Kabalas. And Reb Pinchus had the same thing. I'll tell you a story. About 20 years ago or so, I was Simchas Torah in 770, and they have a kiddush about 10, 11 o'clock already in the sukkah. I think the Rapkins sponsor it, their parents, their father, and people saying l'chaim, and this herring, and this kichlach, and meret, and mezingt, and metanzt. It's you sing, you speak, you dance. And Pinchus was there, and I saw something that surprised me, and I confronted him, and I said, Pinchus, wie kommt es zu dir? Like, how is this something that you're involved with? I don't want to go into what it was, but it was something. And he said to me that in Russia, there's a certain Hayom Yom that the Rebbe writes, which speaks about Kabalas. And the Chassidim interpreted this Hayom Yom like they asked, what was the Chiddush? What was the novelty? We know Kabalas. You don't need a Hayom Yom to tell you about Kabalas. So he told me that Chassidim in Russia interpreted that Hayom Yom to refer to older Chassidim. That the Kabalas here is not to the Rebbe, not to the Eibishter. That's a davar poshet. That's a simple fact. As a chassid, you have obedience to your Rebbe. As a Jew, you have obedience to the Eibishter, to God. But the Hayom Yom here was referring to older chassidim. That younger chassidim should listen to what older chassidim tell them. And he told me that this behavior that I found a little different. He said he heard it from older chassidim, so therefore that's what he does. And that was his entire mahalach hamachshava. That's the way he thought. His thinking was, the older chassid, the Kabalas. This was really who the Pinchus was. He was one shtick Kabalas. His Frumkeit, his religiosity, was also par excellence, and some would say maybe he was what we call in Yiddish farfrumt, a zealot in the area of religiosity. But I believe it was coming from a very holy place, not a place of mishagas or OCD, etc. It was coming from a healthy place. My grandmother, Aleh Sholem, babysat in the Pinchus house 40, 50 years ago when his children were young. I believe this was in the 1960s, 60s or 70s, early 70s. And I remember she told me that if she was in the kitchen, he would not walk into the kitchen, although his wife was home. His wife, Rabbi Korf, who's really a tzaddikus in her own right and a tremendous teacher who taught all of my girls and many thousands of Veshnivka students, just as Rabbi taught thousands of other Torah students and later 770 students. But he was so religious, so fafrumt, that although al pi din, according to the halacha, there was no problem. Your wife's home, and it's the middle of the day, the doors are pretty much unlocked. There's no halachic problem. But he wouldn't go into the kitchen alone if my grandmother was there. And believe me, she was much older than him. Rabbi was a great Talmud Chocham. Rav Agoin, Rabbi Reiport, told me that one of his chavrusas in 770, in the late 50s, was Rabbi Reiport. They learned Gemara together. And last year, Rabbi gave a shiur, a lecture in 770, a pilpul shiur, a deep, intellectual Talmudic shiur. And he said that after the shiur, Rabbi, who his latest position was being a mashgiach, I believe, in 770, he attended the shiur, and he dialogued with him after the shiur. So Rabbi Reiport told me, Cook, the kleine pinye, he called him the small pinye, even though Rabbi Reiport himself is not too tall. Anyway, but the kleine, der Alter, he was amazed that Pinya's, main emphasis seemed to be in Chassidus and in Avodas HaTfilah and davening and Kabalas, and here at his fingertips he was able to dialogue and with Rabbi Reiport about the discussion that he gave in this section of the Gemara of the Talmud, and he was right there. He wasn't like he was right. So he brought back memories, he said, of their chavrusashaft, of their partnership in learning from years back. So he wasn't only a Baal Chassidus, he was a Pashat Talmud Chocham in Halacha, in Gemara. Rabbi made a tremendous decision that to use his talents and his training to teach Bacharim. First, he taught even young boys, teenage boys in Olei Torah in the 60s, and then he continued on being a mashpia in the Mesifta in Olei Torah until, as I said, in 770 for older Bacharim. But he was always involved with teaching, and he has thousands of talmidim, thousands of students. Rapinha, if you asked him to farbrengen, there was no such thing as saying no, unless if he was out of town or Chas Shalom wasn't, he was very sick. But he would mamish go from place to place if he was asked to farbrengen. He came here to Borough Park on so many different occasions, and there might have been only a handful of people, and regardless, he farbrengen the same way. And he sang a lot of nigunim at the farbrengen. He didn't spend lots of time talking. Today, many farbrengens turn into shiurim, lectures. That's not a farbrengen. The Rabbi, as a paradigm Chabad Chassid, and who saw great Chassidim, his own father, Reb Nissen Nemanov, and of course Reb Peretz Mochkin, who he took apprenticeship by while he was in Montreal for years. He went to learn there, and then I think he was a mashgiach there for a while. So he saw what a farbrengen is, and he emulated that type of farbrengen. There's much more we could say, and I'm sure people will say and write, but he was from the last Havdil, as we say, the last Mohegans, the last warriors, Avodas Hashem, Avodas HaTfilah, Kabalas, the good old-fashioned fundamentals of Chabad Hasidus, Rabbi emulated those things. And together with Kabalas of doing what the Rebbe wanted, Mivtzoim. He used to go out weekly on the Rebbe's Mivtzoim to put on tefillin with Yidden. And he schlepped himself, and he took away time from his learning and his davening, because the Rebbe said, now is the time to put on tefillin with Yidden. And finally, when the Rebbe made his emphasis on Bias HaMashiach, and to share with the world the importance of Mashiach and learning about Mashiach and all that, the opinion was right there. And he, together with Zolzain Gezunt, the Rebbe Mochkin, were like the two Mashpiyim who traveled around to be ma'ira, to awaken and arouse Yidden, including Anash Lubavitchers, to learn about Mashiach, do for Mashiach, and make Mashiach a reality in our life. So the Eibishter helfen, v'kitzun v'hanu sheikh offer, who betoicham, that his family, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and thousands of Talmidim will add a mitzvah and learn some Torah, li'ilu nishmosai, and will taka bizoicha to the Gula Shlema, bekoriv mamish, simchas eilam al reisham, only simchas malkeinu beroshenu, bekoriv mamish, amen v'amen.